Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. Well, we're getting to our very exciting part in the story, part 2 of our story today, and what has Gwen uncovered on the sorting table at the thrift shop? You're about to find out now. If you haven't heard part 1 of the story, don't forget to click on the description. And let's continue with our story. Gladys came dashing into the back room. Her face paled of all its colour. She needed to see what her friend was screaming about. To hear her friend cry out like that left every single cell in her body tingling with trepidation, like the vibrating glasses on a sideboard. She was trembling as she ran into the room, holding a baseball bat up in her quivering hand, in a defensive, threatening gesture, almost as if she half expected to be throttling a perfect stranger who had wantonly slipped into the back room, launching an unsuspecting attack on her good friend. But no one appeared to be there. At first Gladys could not see what her friend was screaming about, and sighed with relief as her eyes skimmed the back room rather sceptically. Was Gwen not overreacting? They had seen worse at the thrift store before. Yes, the clothes were pongy, and they smelt of soiled, dirty linen that made you want to gag, but they were used to receiving stuff like this from customers, things that smelt of mothballs, damp, and everything else in between. But why would Gwen scream about this? It was then that she saw the large boa constrictor curled up comfortably among the clothes, looking slightly annoyed to have been thrown out so abruptly onto the table. "It's a bloody snake, Gladys! It's huge! It's a big snake!" The cold, rather aloof snake remained coiled up. It slid slowly towards the manky clothes to once again take cover. Gladys laughed. Her son had owned a boa constrictor once, so the slithering creature did not trouble her in the slightest, nor was she unduly alarmed. The poor thing was probably cold, she told Gwen. "Maybe it was a family pet and crawled into a place to keep lovely and warm. The snake's not going to harm you, Gwen," she assured her. "Let me tell you, he'd prefer infinitely smaller prey than you if he was hungry. But I'm sure the thing did give you a nasty scare, and for that I'm very sorry." "A scare? Are you joking?" said Gwen. She shuddered. "Look at the thing! It's as scary as hell! The only time I want to see a snake skin is on a purse, but not up close and personal like this. I'm bloody petrified of snakes. Those slithering things make my skin crawl. And that thing just needs to crawl up onto my neck and squeeze, and I'd be a goner. And you're acting like it's no big deal." Gladys burst out laughing. "Oh, goodness gracious! Look at your face, Gwen. You really are a picture. You're very lucky you're not my son's mother. He'd have had a field day with you. He'd have slipped all kinds of frightful animal species into your bedroom, just to watch the expressions on your face. I'm rather hardened to all this stuff, so he lost interest in pulling stunts on me a long time ago. But boy, would he love you. Don't worry about the snake, Gwen. I will deal with it. By any chance, do you happen to know the number of the sweet young lady who brought in the clothes for donation? You could phone her, because the boa constrictor is likely a pet of hers." Gladys picked up the boa constrictor and put it in the black bag with some clothes. She was not worried about it at all. "Now, failing that, we could of course call Tom Ellis. He'll give the snake a very good home. Leave him there for the time being in the bag. And don't panic. Remember, it's just a snake, for God's sake. It's not going to harm you at all." "I'm sorry," said Gwen. "You're right. I did overreact. But it's not every day I sort through clothes and come face to face with a snake like this. As for the young lady, she never left her details with me, I'm afraid." "That's an awful pity," said Gladys, "because I think the snake is likely to be her beloved pet. I'm afraid snakes get a bad rap. We'll get Tom to take care of it. And if the lady who donated the clothes pops by and asks where the snake is, she'll be able to pick it up from Tom. It looks very docile at the moment, poor thing. Probably very cold. You gave it quite the fright tipping it out on the table like that, as I imagine it was trying to hide out in a warm, dark place." "You're worried about the snake?" said Gwen gingerly. "What about me? Do you have any idea how freaked out I was, Gladys?" "No more freaked out than the poor snake, I imagine." "Those clothes," said Gladys, "they look to be of reasonably good quality. They smell rather niffy. We need to get them washed before we can sell them, of course." Her eyes fell on the rather distinguished pipe, lying on the side of the table. "Wow, that is quite the most magnificent piece. I know quite a lot about pipes, and this is definitely a collector's item. Someone might really appreciate this. It's a beauty." She looked at the writing on the side. "Wow, I wonder what these words mean. They sound foreign. Or dark lavadul, val vel nakem. How extraordinary. I do wonder what that means." "It's Hungarian. It means the devil rides with me. It once belonged to a serial killer who was executed on death row. Well, that's what the young girl told me. She and her mother want nothing to do with the pipe. They're superstitious about owning a pipe like this. The man was responsible for killing 15 young women and 2 prison guards." This time it was Gladys that looked confounded. For a second her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish, as if she'd lost the ability to speak. And then she said in a slightly quivering voice, "And you accepted this pipe in our thrift store? You are kidding me, right?" Gladys immediately dropped the pipe onto the counter in abject disgust, as if she'd been handling a dirty diaper, and hurried off to wash her hands in a mountain of disinfectant soap, as if afraid she'd been contaminated by the pipe. Finally she looked up at her friend, with a lopsided grin developing on her face. "Oh, very good, girl, very good. You had me going there for a moment," she said. "Getting me back for the snake, are you? You wanted to give me a perfect scare, so I'd fully appreciate the fright you had. Well, it worked. Happy now? You had me going there, you really did. Not even my son has succeeded in winding me up quite like that." "I wish I was pulling your leg, Gladys, but I'm not. Even I haven't got a fertile enough imagination to pull off such an ingenious, innovative stunt. The girl's uncle was given the pipe by a serial killer when he was a prison guard at a prison. The serial killer liked her uncle and wanted the pipe to go to a good home. So he gave it to her uncle. He kept it in a glass cabinet that was locked. Last week, the girl's uncle removed the pipe from a locked glass cabinet to show a curious friend. And get this, the very next morning, the uncle is found lying dead in his home, with strange black finger marks all over his neck. The coroner says he was suffocated and strangled. They're befuddled as to what could have happened to the uncle. He had no known enemies, and was the kindest man you could ever hope to meet, who'd give you the shirt off his back. Well, that's what the girl told me anyway. They're devastated about his fortuitous, rather suspicious demise, which is being thoroughly investigated by the police, but they're drawing blanks on the bizarre case. And after the girl tells you this, Gwen, this incredibly outrageous story, you're telling me you accept this pipe from her? Are you completely insane? You should have refused to accept it. I'm sorry, but if it belonged to a serial killer, I want nothing to do with that pipe, and I doubt any of our customers will either. What the hell were you thinking, Gwen? You're one of the most savvy people I know. But a pipe like this, with a doomful message on its side saying the devil rides with me, is not something any God-fearing man would want to own. Things can have evil attachments to them, you know. Demons are real. I can vouch for that. And I want to assure you, Gwen, it's not to be sneezed at. Why do you think the Catholic Church is often doing exorcisms? It's a very real factor in our lives that should not be sneezed at. With the greatest of respect, Gladys, I don't believe in all that mumbo-jumbo. I think it's absolute nonsense. But not everyone would think like you do anyway. Someone might be willing to give a sizable donation for something that was owned by a notorious villain. People like to own objects of historic interest and intrigue. You see it all the time, don't you, on those antique shows? Like an old calendar with Elvis Presley's signature on it, or a pair of dark glasses that once belonged to Marilyn Monroe. Stuff like that someone might want to own, for the curiosity factor. It could be an interesting conversation piece at a dinner party when you're serving the dessert wine with the pudding. Hi, folks. Let me introduce you to our Hungarian pipe, owned by a notorious villain, responsible for killing 15 women and 2 prison guards, who was put to death. You have to admit, that would not be a dinner party you'd forget in a hurry.
Are you kidding, Gwen? Why would anyone want to own a pipe? Such a dreadful pipe, with a grim reputation, owned by such an unsavoury character. Are you kidding, Gwen? Listen to the way you're talking. Why would anyone want to own a pipe with such a grim reputation, owned by such an unsavoury, vile character? Remind me never to attend any of your dinner parties, if you enjoy flaunting such grotesque curiosities that would make Ripley's Believe It or Not look like a fragrant, sober walk in the park. Oh, by the way, the signet ring belonged to the axe murderer, and Freddy Krueger blew his nose in this handkerchief, and this is his leftover bottle of acne cream that you might want to use if you get a pimple. By the way, you might be interested to know that this toothbrush once belonged to Adolf Hitler. I'm sure you would like to buy it from me. Is that what you're getting at, Gwen? Because it's really not going down very nicely.
All right, you make a point, Gladys. I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that the pipe is everybody's cup of tea, but someone out there might appreciate it. There's no need for you to be so stingingly sarcastic all the time about this. I know you don't believe in the supernatural, Gwen, and I accept that. But my grandmother always warned me, things have energy. And if this pipe has energy of any kind, based on who owned it before, it's not of the good kind of energy. Believe me, you can be sure of that. That serial killer who owned the pipe was executed for his heinous crimes, and he deserved to be, of course, if that woman is to be believed, and is not, of course, spinning you a cruel yarn just to scare the bejesus out of you, which I think is very unlikely. So if her story is true, and the serial murderer killed 15 young women and 2 prison guards, and you want to keep his pipe, I'm sorry, I have to draw the line there in the sand, Gwen. I really do. As a manager of this thrift shop, I must insist categorically there is no way you can sell this pipe to any of my customers. I'm sorry, but you can't. How could I live with myself if I sold it to someone and they were found dead the following morning based on my inability to discern that there is something seriously wrong with that pipe? I can't take a chance like that. It would be like playing Russian roulette with someone's life. Look what happened to the girl's uncle. He shows his friend the pipe one day and is found dead the very next. Try and explain that. I don't believe in coincidences, Gwen. I really don't. You mark my words, that uncle's death is definitely connected to that pipe. We need to throw it in the bin at the back of the shop, along with the rest of the donation the girl gave us, in case it's contaminated with a grotesque energy. Mind you wear gloves when you dispose of it, and wash your hands afterwards thoroughly. Do you understand? Gladys, you're talking to me as if I'm a silly little shop girl with cauliflower for brains, who can't see reason if it's staring me wide in the face. I do understand where you're coming from. You're also making it sound as if the girl's uncle had a deadly infectious disease. He did not. And for your information, coincidences happen all the time. Maybe the uncle rubbed someone up the wrong way, you don't know. They murdered him possibly for that. Stranger things have happened. It doesn't mean that his untimely death is remotely connected to the pipe. In fact, the idea is ridiculous. It's a material object, for God's sake. It's like saying that the rack of coats over there is responsible for gunning down a supermarket of people. No one would buy that for a moment. Do you know how insane that sounds? If you were to tell people that, they'd think you were inebriated or as mad as a March hare. I admit it's an unfortunate coincidence, but it is what it is. There's nothing paranormal about that pipe. But if you want me to throw it out with all the clothes, I will do as you say and respect your decision. But I promise you this, Gladys, you're worrying about absolutely nothing. I know, Gwen, that you don't believe in dark energy and demonic beings, but I do. And you need to at least try and respect my opinion on these matters, rather than appear to mock me as you're doing right now. I haven't made fun of you being afraid of that snake, so I would thank you to kindly do the same. Don't get me wrong, it was kind of the girl to donate that stuff, of course it was, and I'm sure she meant well. But I want nothing to do with this pipe, nor the clothes that this uncle donated.
I thought I'd seen my fair share of abominable donations in the last few years here at Out of the Closet thrift shop, but this one takes the biscuit. It is to date the most appalling donation we have ever yet received. Everything about this day has been weird, and that woman coming into the thrift shop out of the blue this afternoon is weirder still. I wish to God you had taken down all her details. At the very least, we could give her back her god-awful pipe and the pet snake that so happens to take refuge in a bag with a pipe and the logo on its back that reads, "The Devil Rides With Me." It gives me the creeps. And after your story about the uncle being found lying dead after examining the pipe, after he removed it from the glass cabinet, I'm sorry, but we could not pass this pipe on to anyone in case it's cursed or something. Look at me. The hairs are standing up on the back of my neck, just thinking about it. In truth, I don't think I've been more freaked out by anything in my entire life. In truth, I doubt I'm going to get any sleep tonight. My feathers have been well and truly ruffled.
Look, I do admit the way the uncle died was strange, said Gwen obsequiously. But I'm sure it really is just a coincidence and nothing more than that. I think you're just being way too superstitious and very, very sensitive about everything.
I'm the manager of this thrift shop, Gwen. And what I say goes, said Gladys, with a surprising, indignant but stern tone to her voice. Do it now, Gwen. Throw the stuff out right away. I will put the snake in another bin liner with other clothes until I get him rehomed. I am being deadly serious about this, Gwen. We need to get rid of that stuff now, without delay.
Gwen's account. It had been a strangely unsettling day at the out-of-the-closet thrift shop, especially after my outlandish, idiosyncratic encounter with a mysterious, shy, dark-haired girl with one brown eye and one green eye, and her earnestly concerned words, "You'll take care, won't you?" I was feeling more than a little discomposed and somewhat ruffled like a pigeon who'd been almost eaten up by the family cat and had managed to escape with its life, minus a few feathers, and with its pride slightly injured. I was not the kind of person that got easily spooked or was remotely superstitious. Indeed, when I saw a ladder on the high street, I'd likely walk under it to prove the point that there was no such thing as bad luck connected with such items of woe. I realised in hindsight that Gladys was absolutely right. I could have been a whole lot more discerning. I should have declined the donation from the young bashful girl. But she was so desperate to donate her uncle's stuff, claiming he adored animals. It would have seemed ungracious not to accept the things he had once owned, as if I was rebuffing his magnanimous gestures from beyond the grave. I'd never been given to being anxious about much, but after my discomposing encounter with a boa constrictor on the sorting table in the back room, everything on that afternoon had grown from bad to worse. As if after the girl had arrived in our thrift shop, everything had gone from bad to worse. It was as if the in-the-closet store had been invisibly marked under a dark, inauspicious cloud of negativity, almost as if the whole upbeat, positive, cheery vibe of the thrift shop appeared to have lost its rosy glow. Many of the locals enjoyed popping into the shop, not only for a casual, brief natter, but to see if somebody else's second-hand goods might indeed become their treasure. But on this late afternoon, not even a solitary soul crossed the threshold of the store, as if something untoward was keeping them away. Since I'd moved to this small prepossessing town over 2 years ago, I had felt like I'd returned home, along with an incongruous, profound sense that I'd been here before. The only way I can describe it to you is if you plant a native indigenous plant in an alien place, far away from where it belongs, and then you return it to the place where it was originally grown. The plant stretches out its roots in the soil, sensing everything is right, the temperature conditions are favourable, the elements in the soil are just exactly like it should be. And my guess is the plant says, "I'm home." Even if it never grew up there, it senses this is where it belongs. It had been like that for me and my husband Lucas. Over the last couple of years since we had moved to the small town, Gladys had become my very best friend, and it felt as if we had known each other all our lives. We were more like close sisters than friends. She had invited me to join her in working free of charge at the In-the-Closet charity shop, and for me it was the perfect opportunity to make new friends and to get acquainted with all the locals, and the idea had worked like a charm. Indeed, if you asked any of the locals how long I'd lived in the town, They'd likely forget that I hadn't been there forever. Suffice to say, if you had seen us together that afternoon, you would have thought we were sworn enemies, with a major personality clash that struggled to get along. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the normally even-tempered, fun-loving Gladys had grown as prickly as a porcupine, and had been snapping at me all day like a cantankerous turtle, and she was one of the most serene, easy-going people I knew. But the rest of that afternoon in the thrift shop was one of the heaviest I've known on record. And it was all because of that damn pipe and a heap of smelly clothes that had been handed in to me by a strange girl. Since she'd entered the shop like an unsightly tornado, everything had gone badly awry. As a result, I was longing for Gladys to shut up shop, so I could safely return to the loving, reassuring arms of my husband Lucas, who would help calm down the storms after the rather miserable afternoon I'd had spent with Gladys. My husband Lucas could bring the light into a hopelessly dark situation and make you see it wasn't so bad after all. I hasten to say, soon after the girl had left the thrift shop, the sunlight dissipated, and dark thunderous clouds rolled across the firmament, reflecting the tense mood in the shop. I'd never known the last couple of hours in the shop to be so deathly quiet, but after the girl left, it was as if everybody else had left too, which was peculiarly strange, and put Gladys in an even more foul mood. "Look how quiet it is, Gwen," she said to me accusingly, as if somehow it was all my fault that no customers had stepped into the shop. "I'm sorry, Gwen, but it needs to be said, and so I'm going to say it. It's not normally so deathly quiet like this. Ever since you accepted that donation from that girl, things in the shop have gone airy. I blame you, Gwen, for your poor lack of judgment in this case. I would personally never have accepted that pipe after I heard about its dreadful history. But oh no, you were swooning around that girl, treading on eggshells not to offend her, when you should have said, based on what she told you about the pipe, 'I'm sorry, but I can't possibly accept it.' I can assure you, an item with such a grim history behind it could not possibly be appreciated by any of my clients. It would be irresponsible of me to sell such a thing. You do understand, don't you? I'm not speaking a foreign language to you, am I? We are on the same page, I hope." "It's just a material object, Gladys, owned by someone with an unsavoury reputation. That is all it is. It's no big deal. Do you really want us to fight about this?" "It is a big deal," said Gladys. "Do you think it's normal for the shop to be this quiet? I'm telling you, the moment that pipe came into the shop, the place has gone dreadfully gloomy." "It's not the shop, Gladys. It's your foul mood. That's what it is. And the weather isn't helping either. It's gone overcast outside," I said, glancing out of the window miserably, sensing that spring still seemed beyond our grasp. "My point exactly. It was going to be such a bright, sunny day today. And that pipe comes into our shop, and the weather completely shifts." "Well, I did what you wanted. I threw the pipe and all the clothes away," I said to Gladys snappily. "Well, you've done the right thing. Well done. I'm proud of you." I was feeling annoyed with Gladys for laying the blame at my door about accepting the charity donation from that girl. She had blown a storm in a teacup that had been so reactive I was still squirming from the after effects. I'd never known my friend to be as thorny as a field of briars. If the truth be told, I was sure in similar circumstances she would have done exactly the same and accepted the donation, even though she denied it passionately. Let me tell you, at the best of times, it's very hard to turn away generous donations from people. But Gladys was blaming me for the pipe that thankfully I'd thrown away in the back of the shop, along with the girl's uncle's clothes. Throughout the day, the girl's warning words, "You will take care, won't you?" kept thundering into my head like a booming drum, and they continued to pierce my mind intrusively and give me chills that ran down the back of my neck. Tom had collected the boa constrictor from the shop, declaring it to be an absolute beauty that he'd personally like to keep as a pet. He was welcome to it as far as I was concerned. I was glad to see the back of it. Tom was going on and on about its magnificent markings. Personally, I couldn't see the attraction. As I watched him handle the snake, that seemed to be lovingly sliding over his arm, coiling himself around him as if Tim was his greatest friend. "This is quite some snake," he said. "Magnificent. I hope she won't be claimed. I'd very much like to keep her. At least we had one happy customer. I had dragged the warm, smelly bin liner to the back of the shop, where there was a large dumpster in the back. When I opened the lid, it was crawling with maggots, a sight unusual for early May, where I hadn't even encountered a single fly yet the weather was still too cold for them. But this dumpster had become a maggot breeding machine, and it smelt as if a decaying corpse was lying at the bottom of the thing. But I did not want to investigate any further. I was sure it must be a dead raccoon or rat that had got caught in the dumpster somehow, and frankly, I really didn't want to know the details. I slammed the lid back down on the thing and raced back to the thrift store as fast as I could, as if I'd been fitted with robotic legs. I returned to the shop feeling deflated and rather sombre, and it didn't help that Gladys continued to bark at me throughout the day. She really was very indignant and rather angry with me, and I thought she was being exceedingly unreasonable. I think she thought I should have been more discerning about accepting that young lady's donation. But in all my time working at the thrift shop, Gladys had harped on and on about not causing our customers offence. "You must remember, Gwen," she told me, "when someone is giving a charitable donation, they're doing it from the goodness of their hearts. Even if they're inadvertently giving you a washing sack full of their grandfather's cheesy socks. We sort through everything and throw away things that are inappropriate. But it really isn't kind to turn away a well-meaning donation as far as I'm concerned." I had heeded her advice diligently, and was being treated by her as if I had committed a cardinal sin. I couldn't help wondering if the boot were on the other foot, whether Gladys would have turned this sweet, nervous young girl away, who seemed afraid of her own shadow, and I don't think she would have done so, if I'm being brazenly honest. So there we are. That's the end of part 2. And it's building up to become incredibly exciting, so you don't want to miss out on part 3. And I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.